Hi, this is Tina and Tim again, and today we're going to talk about different types of consultations we've had where it's going to be information that's useful for you. And today it's about why you need an attorney in a divorce action. So Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about a fun scenario that we could pick apart in less than 3 minutes?
A client calls in, they handled their divorce on their own. They came to what's called a consent agreement. So they negotiated everything, filled it all out. We're good to go and submit it, and they're divorced. Problem is, there's a lot that goes into a divorce that they didn't put in there. For example, equitable distribution.
And so let's talk about that. If you don't have a divorce and you're given the uncontested divorce packet, the assumption is you don't own anything. If you don't own anything, it's easy. When there's that little box that says you don't want anything from the other and everything's been distributed, well, the assumption is those things that you distributed were either easy to distribute, like your toothbrush, or it was a bill that was in your name, or a car that was in your name, or perhaps a house that was in your name. Those would be simple things to distribute because they're attached to either one of you. The tricky part is when somebody comes to us and said, hey, I just did an uncontested divorce, and by the way, my wife wants money out of the house. Well, the first question you ask is, well, is the house in both of your names? And if the answer is yes, it wasn't resolved in the divorce, because how are you going to sell the house without the wife's signature or your signature if she owned the house? And now what are you going to do if there's money left over? What are you going to do if there's a deficiency? You didn't put any of that in that uncontested divorce packet. So that is one of the reasons you should have a lawyer if you own assets or you have a bunch of liabilities that are jointly held. So Tim, what else happens when you use the uncontested divorce package in terms of custody of your children? Go ahead.
If you don't put the provisions in there of what happens, let's say you have the children 50-50. So on your parenting time, you have to work. And you say, well, I have to work, so you got to take the kids. And the spouse says, nope, your parenting time, you have nothing back in that paperwork to fall back on. Or, oh, hey, it's Christmas. I'd really like to have Johnny this year. Can you come over at noon? Oh, you didn't put that provision in there. Guess what? Nope. Or, oh, I see that Johnny has a doctor's appointment. What's going on? If it's not put in there that you have reasonable access and access to all them, it doesn't exist. It's done. Bye.
And bye is correct, especially if you have 50-50 custody and you have bare bones provisions. Well, really, like Tim said, don't look to the other side. You're the parent, deal with it. Find a babysitter, use a relative. If you can't find a relative and your last option is what? Hire somebody.
Well, and here's the example, right? Even when you're married, let's say you're not divorcing, right? Normal couples, I have to work, my spouse has to step up. If my spouse has to work, I've got to call a sitter or I've got to call a family member. I don't call the court and say, hey, my wife and I are having a problem with the babysitter. Can you tell her to go find one for me? That makes absolutely no sense.
And
no sense.
And you don't, Tim, come on. From our experience, don't involve the court, because the court is not sympathetic to that tune. It's the wrong song to be singing. They don't want to micromanage your life. They're hoping as adults who chose to have children, you can work out the logistics of your own life, especially when it comes to 50-50. You want it 50-50, then handle it half the time, right?
Let's talk about this 50-50, right? Because most people, why do you end up doing your divorce yourself? And you don't want to spend the money. Plain and simple, you don't want to spend the money. So a lot of people will say, well, I want 50-50 because that makes perfect sense. And not to sound shady, but they do it because they don't want to pay support. Well, here's a lovely thing in New York State that you have to understand, that just by way of having 50-50 does not absolve you of your support obligation, folks.
So if you want to interact with the court all the time, don't hire a lawyer and have an uncontested divorce where there's so many unresolved issues. I was thinking of a word to use, and it's almost like reverse engineering is what you're going to have to do on a divorce that has nothing to it. So there's no guidelines.
And here's the problem, because the judge is going to ask you, this was on consent. You agreed to everything in here. Why now? Why didn't you consult an attorney? Why didn't you do the process that way the first time? You agreed to it.
Correct. So this is our short morning. Sometimes an uncontested divorce is for people that really don't have any assets or liabilities. If they already have a custody order and they want to incorporate it from family court, perfect. If they have a family court order of support and they're just incorporating, perfect. If the issue of spousal maintenance, that's a little box you check, mutual waivers. And it's also for people that may have hired an attorney in the past and they just need that agreement to be part of the judgment of divorce. But if you have something that's a little more complicated, or that there could be issues in the future, even about custody, you need to hire a lawyer. It's one of those few times, break open the wallet and find somebody. So
Absolutely.
So Tina and Tim, we are out, and hopefully you found our information helpful this morning. So have a good one. Goodbye.